It's finally happened. Your home, lost in the Eversea. The last of the airships have taken your people to safety. All you have, a few friends, and a trusty skiff. You make for the Iron Islands. Tides be damned. This is the start of a campaign, Lost in the Eversea. I am now doing a full campaign with the pressure system. No more playtests. I have a senpai, a mentor of sorts, who's helping me. And the first thing he said is no more playtests. You just got to get into a campaign. You got to stop armchair designing and just start rolling. So guess what? We're rolling. And Wednesday, 2 days ago from today, we had our first session. What's going to happen now in the rest of this video is 3 things. I'm going to talk about the session. Players, skip that. Those who are in my campaign. I'm going to talk about the behind the scenes of the session, like how I designed the session. Players, skip that one. And then I'm going to talk about results of the playtest. Like what are the things that maybe I'm going to tinker with and move forward with. So those are the 3 timestamps I'll have underneath. That's it. Those are the only 3 timestamps. Otherwise, we're going to get rolling. Welcome everyone to Jface Games. For those that are new, I'm designing an RPG, and this is what's happening. So what happened in Lost in the Eversea? Well, I'm going to skip a lot of the lore. We'll probably get through the lore later on. But in essence, the players live on an island that floats above the sea, and the world is just one giant ocean with all kinds of terrible stuff in it. So most people live on these floating islands. Occasionally, these islands might finally, the crystals inside them, which are these sky crystals, finally die or are overmined, and the island comes crashing to the sea. These individuals are on an island, and that's what just happened. Most people have gotten off because there's a lot of airships. You can use this sky crystal. It's very valuable to fly your ships, or you can take your ships and land them on the Eversea and sail, but that is obviously incredibly dangerous because the Eversea is just full of just awful things. The biggest threat are leviathans, massive monsters that fight each other and will take down any ship they find. So the campaign starts. That was that little segue that I described earlier. We started with that, and then we went straight onto the ship. The players are on their ship sailing, and immediately we go into a combat. Why? Because I want to get these guys on their toes. I want them to realize that the world is dangerous, and I want to test out the system, right? That's the whole point. And a big part of my system is combat. So we go straight to combat. In essence, these little 2 to 3 foot manta ray humanoids, right? Humanoids, little arms, little legs, and these manta ray sort of fins coming off the backs. They come riding a wave, crashing onto the ship. They are trying to rip at the hull and sink the ship, and they're in different little groups. So you've got one group over here ripping at the ship, one group over here ripping the ship, a couple on the back. I rolled a D4 timer for each of the groups, and so now the players know that, oh, we got to deal with this one, then that one, then this one, or whatever the case might be. The players launch straight into action. There are 3 players. One, and I would be able to describe them easily when the classes are fully fleshed out. But because the roles we have in this system and the classes, it's very atypical in terms of design. For instance, one of the players that comes to mind, one of his personal flavors is he has a big axe, right? And if you looked at his character sheet, his background, you would say, oh, this character seems like they're probably going to be a fighter of some sort. But the class they took is the talent, which is sort of the spellcasting class, and the role they took is the leader. So they have ways to help people in the group move around and rally them. They have a big-ass axe, and they... Oh, gosh, stop using an axe. And they have magical talents, right? So who knows how that class is going to be. One of the other characters is a little bit more... Oh, no, one of the characters is the striker, who's going to be... That's the role, so they want to do massive damage. But the class they have is the zealot, which is kind of more the healer, cleric-y type. So that's interesting. They're a spike damage cleric of some sort. And then the final one is the controller. And so they're going to be trying to mess with the enemy and sort of manipulate the battlefield, but they're also the rogue, right? Which is a little bit more squishy of sorts, right? Your typical rogue. So those are kind of the 3 characters. And their names are Salazar is the big axe talent. Locke is our zealot striker. And Gunter is a pistol-wielding rogue who is a controller. So those are the 3 individuals. They're on the boat. They also have 3 friends, just other people that were there. 2 of them die one of them dies really quickly by these little manta guys, but they're able to take out the rest. Another one's injured, but they're able to keep them alive. And so they end up taking out these mantas. It was a very fast, very quick. These guys go down, quick. It was just more the drama of two things. One, I wanted to make the sea look dangerous. Two, I wanted to threaten the ship. And then three, what I added in, and this was kind of random, is that one of the players, his personal flavor, life event, his personal flavor. His personal flavor was Leviathan blood. Like there's in essence a bloodline of Leviathan. And so with that, I just made up, design-wise and sort of thematically, that because he has Leviathan blood, he can understand the creatures of the sea. He just can't communicate back to them. So he hears these guys. Everyone else hears these things squealing and kind of grunting and making high-pitched noises. What he hears is, in essence, she comes, or no, something along the lines of like for her, right? Something like that. And so he's getting this ominous feeling of, they're trying to give this ship to something. And so I wanted to give that sense of we're being hunted or chased. So that was the opening scene. They then make it to the Iron Islands. And the Iron Islands, in essence, was this sort of obsidian black rock that's just sitting out of the ground. It's a small little island with a lighthouse, right? That's all they see. And there's a capsized ship. So I gave them a couple things to see. There's a capsized ship. There's this copper sort of stone in the middle of the island. And then there's this lighthouse. They explore the ship first. There's another minor encounter, but it's more they kind of problem solve the encounter with these giant sort of slugs that are inside the ship that they're able to lure out and kind of kill very easily. It was threatening, though. And then they go up and they investigate this sort of copper thing, and they realize it's a compass and it's pointing the wrong way. They turn it the right way, and all of a sudden it opens up and there's a staircase going down. Now, during this time, I also loved that there was a lot of role play happening from the characters. So I'm skipping some of the role play and the story and the character interdynamics, but there was a lot of fun interdynamics between these three characters. They then go down into this cave and they investigate, and it seems that they found a base of sorts, or at least a way stop of sorts, because there's a massive map the massive stone table with a map on it with all these pieces, and the pieces are moving automatically. And so they're trying to figure out what that means. There's some testimonials sort of carved into the walls, and I gave them those testimonials so they could read. And then the final thing is there's a giant crustacean, like a huge crab, and it's inside a cage, and they can see that the crab is sitting over a small trap door of sorts, but it's more like a cellar door, right? And so they're looking at that. So what happens? A couple things happen. Locke and Gunter go over to the table, and they're trying to decipher what's going on. They got some logs, like maps and logs from the capsized ship, and they're trying to compare that to the map on the table. And what they were able to deduce is that there's two different color stones. Some are black, some are gray. They don't know what these mean, but they see that one of the black ones seems to be beelining for their island, and they deduce that it's probably going to be there in the next 5 hours. So something is coming straight for this island. At this point in time, Salazar decides that he's going to try and push this cage with the crustacean in it and slide the entire thing to reveal the trapdoor. Instead of we got to fight this crustacean, open this and see what we can do, he decides, I'm just going to muscle this thing out of the way, and he has the skill for force in order to this thing. And so he does it. And it was, at first he was a little, and then he was able to get some leverage and push this thing. And the crustacean was just happily just kind of moving to the side inside this thing. They then open up this trapdoor. Locke, being the seaman and sort of the, adventurer he is, just jumps down. In essence, it's a mine shaft. And the mine shaft doesn't go very far. He doesn't hurt himself, luckily. And it kind of goes down and he ends up in water that's up to his thighs. The water goes a little bit into the mine shaft, and he notices the water's kind of filling. The other things he recognizes is that he sees these little red eels floating in the water. He sees a skull embedded on the side of the mine shaft. And then on the other side of the mine shaft, he sees this glow. And that's the real thing that enticed him to drop down, is there was a glowing sort of look to the mine shaft. And what he finds is a vein of sky crystal. And so he realizes that, we have a vein of sky crystal. That one, this is incredibly valuable. But two, if we can get this out and we can mine this, and he asks Gunter, who is an airman, he can fly airships. He asks Gunter, how much sky crystal would we need to actually get our skiff airborne? And Gunter tells him, and they probably have it. But he climbs out. But before he climbs out, he's looking at these little red eels that are about yay big, and he decides to grab one. And he gets this sharp pain, and he opens his hand, and it's gone. He sees the tail of it as it goes into his skin. And I'll talk about what happens with that in just a second. So then he climbs back out. They're wondering what to do. They go topsides. At that point in time, they go topside. They don't try to mine it or anything yet. They decide let's finish investigating this entire island. They head up to the lighthouse, and the lighthouse, after they do a little series of climbing in order to get up there, is this massive 2 foot by 2 foot emerald that they realize Salazar does an appraisal on. It realizes it is incredibly wealthy, incredibly expensive, valuable, whatever you want to say, but it's constantly shining. Like, it is an emerald that is almost sunlight bright, and it's constantly lighting out this sort of lighthouse. And they're wondering if they could take it, and they're wondering if they could sell it. But at this point in time, they say, hey, you know what? That black object is still coming towards us. Let's take our ship, put it on the other side of the island, which the island's not very big. Let's wait here and see what it is that's coming, and we can figure out if they're just going to come and leave. That's that. Well, they wait, and what ends up happening is they see in the distance that it is actually a leviathan that is boring down towards this island, this massive tidal wave that it's bringing with it, and that's where we stopped. And that was the session. So they realized then that the black rocks that are moving around on this map are in fact tracking leviathan that are moving around the seas, and that's where we stopped. Now, this is where we get into the prep. What did I do to prep, and sort of how did I prep? Well, let's go here. This were my prep notes. So in essence, I tried to make it super simple, right? I used this kind of see, explore, discover process. And this is, I want to say that this was, I'm not trying to be railroady, but I definitely just created, here are 5 little rooms, investigate them at whatever pace or order you want to, and we'll go from there. So this was the skiff attack. They named the skiff the Hope, which I thought was a really fun name. And then this was just the encounter attack. There was no like prep for this. And if I clicked on this, it would take us to the monster itself. Now, as you come down, when I had the shoreline approaching, I had a little descriptor like, hey, this is what you see, or this is what the scene is, and then I say what you see, right? And so I tell them there's a chain coming with this copper color stone, there's the hull, there's the lighthouse. If they explored each of those, this is what they would kind of just determine or discover, right? And once again, if they explored it, I use the sort of tactic of, if you explore it, you know there's a door there, a hidden door of some sort. It's now just a matter of, can you actually figure it out, right? Can you actually get it open? Here's the giant slugs, here's the emerald, etc. That's it. Those are my notes, right? The rest of it is kind of, let's see what happens. The hideaway, this is when they went down. There was the giant crustacean, which they never fought. There was the wall of carved testimonies. And so here are the testimonies themselves. I had 3 quick little testimonies. You can pause this and read this if you want. I'm not going to go into the lore. I'm just kind of giving an idea here. And then we had the table, right? And the crustaceans. Now, and then finally, here's the mine shaft itself with the indigo glow, the red eels, the skull on the wall. And then what are the things they would find out, right? There's a mine, and I had it, and obviously, hopefully the players aren't watching, but I had it so that if they mined it, and they didn't mine it well, in essence, that there was then going to be a timer for flooding. Seawater was going to start pouring in. They were going to have to get out of there as soon as possible, and now we've got a dilemma of dealing with that. The skull, I was thinking about making like for those that like Dresden Files, like a bob, like it was going to actually talk to you, and if you could get it off of there, then you would have this little companion potentially from then on out. What else did I have? I was not expecting anything from them, but what I thought was interesting were a couple things. One, I was trying to test out the combat system, mostly. That was the main thing. And I was trying to test out wind pressure, when I could manipulate pressure and make pressure higher or lower, depending on the scenarios. And that was interesting to me because, for instance, the giant sea slug encounter, I wanted to make these things very dangerous if you're up close. And so one of the players backed away while the other players were luring it out. And so I made that individual who was backed away a D6 pressure. And I made the individual who was right up next to it a D10 pressure, right? Based on their threat level. Now, what I'm going to have to do is have to make sure that player who backed away doesn't feel like it's always safe to back away, or doesn't complain about times when all of a sudden, hey, I'm really far away. Why is my pressure a D12, right? So there's going to be different scenarios that I'm going to have to play with. What are the sort of mechanics? So it's not just the DM having to make it up on the fly. What I did, though, what was interesting is that because he was using, in essence, a blunt, I think it was because it was a piercing damage, I made these things almost gelatinous in nature, so that if I'll pull it up. This is, once again, these are rudimentary notes. But in essence, I had it so that if you were using a finesse, which is sort of more piercing weapon, that no matter what, you're only going to do 1 damage because it's just kind of going bloop, just kind of going in. Whereas if you're using some sort of slashing weapon, you were going to do extra damage, right? You were going to do additional damage. So even though his threat was low, when he would hit it, I kept narrating the fact that it seemed like just like that. It was just kind of just going into it, and the creature didn't seem to be phased or agitated by it. Whereas when the people hacked at it, it was just gory and stuff was spraying and etc. So I believe after the fact, he told me that it felt that way. What else was sort of on the fly? You know, a lot of things that were on the fly was letting the player move the giant cage with the crustacean. I had no idea what was going to happen. I just set the stage. I set the room, right? And I let them come up with what they're going to do. The objects on the map, one of the players wanted to investigate some of the stones from the other ones, and I had an idea for that, right? I had an idea that this is, in essence, a pirate. This is where it's interesting. It's either a pirate hideaway, or like a base or way station, or it's a rebellion way station. I'm leaving it ambiguous for one of the others. And what do I mean by that? Is that now they've seen these gray and black moving pieces around the map. The black I knew was going to be Leviathans. The gray, I still have in my head whether it's going to be that those are the pirate ships, a part of this sort of... Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, yeah, it's either one of these two things. That either those are the pirate ships that are sort of a part of this like group, right? So they can track each other, or that those are military ships, so that now that serves two purposes. Either one, these are pirates who want to track the military so that they know that they can go elsewhere, or two, these are rebels. You know, rebels that are dealing with against the big empire of sorts, and they're tracking the empire's military movement so they know where to strike or where to go, right? So that's what the players don't know yet, is that part. Now, other things that were sort of really interesting is these red eels, right? So these red eels, the way I designed them is that I thought it was going to be maybe a swarm at first and you get attacked. But then I thought, well, you know what? We have this new system, and that system being that we have this health right here with stress and these shocks. And we don't have these shocks filled in yet. And for those that are new, these shocks, in essence, at some point in time when you take damage, you're going to fill in these bubbles instead of taking it away from like, oh, I've got 30 hit points. Instead, if you took 5 damage, you could say, oh, I'm going to fill in a 4 and a 1, or I'm going to fill in 2 2s and a 1, etc. Any point in time you fill a complete row in, whatever the shock is, happens, right? Some of these shocks will be good, like you all of a sudden have an adrenaline rush. Some of these shocks will be bad, okay? What I had the player do is the player who decided, I'm just going to pick up this red eel, and then it went, and I had him make a body save, and he failed his body save. And so what then happened was it got inside him. And now I then told him, I said, I want you to write into the shock blank next to the 2s, I want you to write red eel. And that's all I said. And what that means is this now created a new mechanic that I had no intention of doing. But this created this new mechanic that now at some point in time when he fills in all 3 of these red or these 2s, something is going to happen, right? And he has no idea what it is. And I'm not going to spoil it yet, so you guys have to wait too. But the idea is now there's a whole other use for these shocks, right? It's not just, oh, I get this power, I get that power. Now there's this threat of, here's a new shock that you have no idea what it is, and we'll see what happens, right? So that was really exciting. That was a fun moment to me. That was one of the most giddy moments for me, and I think it was one of the most giddy moments for the players too, because all the players were like, oh man, I can't wait to see what happens. Now, what else? I think this Leviathan, when they arrive, there's probably going to be, I have no idea yet what's going to happen. I think that there's probably going to be a lot of narration in terms of the Leviathan's going to smell them, not maybe see them. The one player is going to be able to hear what the Leviathan's actually saying. Odds are what they do, it's all dependent on what they do. I mean, this Leviathan, there's a good chance it's going to destroy their boat. So who knows what then happens. So hopefully they can figure out what to do with that. But at the moment, the players are waiting it out. So I don't see anything fantastic happening from that standpoint. We'll find out. This might be a short-lived group. They might just get eaten by a Leviathan session 2. That's pretty much it. That shows my approach to design in terms of the encounter, right? I just made these sort of like little rooms, quote unquote, and I put some see, explore, discover stuff. What else? These were my playtest notes. So now let's talk about some of the stuff we'd noticed. So now, welcome to the playtest notes for those that are just joining this section. Good things. Good things I found was that when players picked up the pressure die, they felt the pressure. Even when they knew the math. Even if they knew, oh, you know what? D8, I have a D8 and the pressure's a D10. That's not too bad. Like, mathematically, that's not too bad, right? It's not great, but it's not too bad. But when a player picked up a D10 and they had to roll that, they felt it. They said, oh, I'm not ready for this, right? So that's perfect. That's what I want. The gearbox concept. So this is, in essence, Forged in the Dark. Forged in the Dark, if we come here on the character sheet, this is their equipment down here. And you can see they have, this is my actual equipment, and these are gear slots. And different classes have more boxes. Gear slot being, oh, I've got a rope, check. I then check a box. Instead of I've prepared my rope and I have it in my gear already, they just felt competent, right? They were able to have a spyglass in order to look in the distance. They were able to have rope. They were able to have, that made them feel good. It made them feel as competent players, and it inspired inspiration or role play. So I loved it. Background generation. So this background generation is very much looked at from Quest, from Crown and Skull, from Distal, very similar, where you have this Mad Lib you're going to fill out. Down here, these are the different professions. All right, so we have, the background question is in essence, I was born as a part of status, an adjective, settlement, blah, 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 etc. And in essence, you're going through and you're going to get your status, and this is very distal in terms of it's going to determine different skills. You then have, eventually this will have bonuses, the area you're from, the type of settlement you're from, the community. This is very much from Quest in terms of community. The motivation you have, sort of the archetype motivation, the flaw you have, the ideal you have. This is directly from Quest. I'm even determining if I care for ideals. I don't know if it's necessary. It might be redundant with your motivations. And then a life event, and that life event is based off of your motivations. Like, what is the life event for your motivation? Which you can opt out of. Instead, you could just say, since I was born, right? And then finally, we have emotional state and personal flavors. These personal flavors were really fun to kind of whip together some of them on the fly. But in essence, for instance, here's the person, my vein runs with Leviathan blood. You have a bloodline that's tainted with Leviathans. You understand but cannot speak the language of the sea. Once a session, you can control a large amount of water with your will, right? Just something flavorful, something cool. Etc. So then they would have this completely filled out, and I'll give an example of one. Let me read one as an example, because one of my players has already sent me theirs, or I've heard everyone's, but this one actually, I'm having them all send them to me so that I can actually write them out, right? This was the individual who had a big axe. Ready? I was born as part of the aristocracy in a nomadic frontier settlement where people are known for seeking justice for others. Now, aristocracy in this sense is sort of like ruling class, so it fits. I seek glory, but am an arrogant champion. I believe in heroism ever since the king called for heroes. This might be a mistake, but I have a big axe. So that is their character. And so they were able to come up with a lot of fun concepts based off of that, and we've been moving forward. Now, what next? If we look at the playtest, other things they liked, they loved the hero dice. They felt empowered. And the nice thing is that I felt that escalation mechanic that we came up with, where the idea being that you have hero dice sitting in this vault, which are D6s, you can roll and add to any rolls you've already made, but you don't get the D6s into your active until the end of your turn. So the end of your turn, you get to move one from the vault to the active. And so that means you're not going to have one on your first turn, but you'll have one on your second turn. And if you don't use that one, you'll have two on your third turn. So there's a nice little, I get more powerful and I can save up for something. The tactical actions people thought were really fun. Gave them something to do on other people's turn. Speed of combat was really quick, but these were very non-complex combats. The stress health mechanic, people really liked the idea, but we didn't really pump up any stress. Once again, these were very low level monsters. They love the suspense of the shock, and then the world. They love the setting, and they love the variability of sort of non-traditional class roles and characters. Some stuff I thought was interesting. This is neutral. We didn't manipulate the pressure die at all in this session, but once again, we didn't have any threatening combat really. And then here's my analysis of needs and considerations, things I'm looking to do. I'm going to breeze through this. But in essence, the first part being we need an equipment list. Like this also was very low in terms of like having just 2 equipment slots to start off. Some people had 3. Like if one of those is your weapon and one of those is your armor, it doesn't give a lot more to fill out. So I've got to really make a robust equipment list, and I've got to make that section a little bit more robust so that you can add a couple more things that are more your static equipment, right? Need for much scarier monsters. That's going to be easy just to really kind of mess with that and to mess with saving throws a little bit more. The players didn't have to make a ton of saving throws, and I think that some monsters will do that. The heroes felt pretty damn powerful with those hero dice, but once again, once we get some monsters a little scarier, I think that's going to change some of that. Armor was the only part that was a little bit tricky, and I think that this was the interesting thing for me is that I think that my armor issue was because of this brace mechanic. Now, what does that mean? Well, there was this tactical action that I fell in love with a long time ago, which was that if you ever brace, what that does is say you have a certain amount of damage mitigation. Let's say your damage mitigation is 2. So if you're going to take 5 damage, you then only take 3 damage, right? Simple. I liked this idea that one of the tactical actions I can take on my turn, right, which is in essence like a bonus action, is that I can brace. And what happens is when I brace, I double whatever my normal resistance is. So now instead of saying, oh, I can resist 2 damage, I resist 4. If I normally resist 3 damage, I resist 6. And it makes you very good as a tank to be able to resist those things. Well, the problem is that then it becomes weird because now you have 2 numbers in essence you're dealing with. I'm trying to find where this is. I think it's under equipment. So in essence, we have this chart right here, which is a little confusing, where it's like this is your mitigation number, and then this is your damage number, right? Or your armor number. Because now I'm rolling if the pressure is a D8, I've got to roll the D6 to see how much damage I would take, which would be the difference if the D10 beat the D6. And then whatever that is, I got a -2. And that gets a little bit like, I don't know if we need to do that. And so I think the problem was I was basing this armor idea off of the brace mechanic because I liked the brace mechanic because I thought bracing was cool. Now, I think I'll still keep brace. I think that bracing will just do an advantage die of some sort, right? So now it'll be something a little bit more streamlined where it's like the armor will be a dice, and if you brace, you get an extra D6, right? You take the higher or the lower. So now what happens is if I have no armor, if I got no armor, I'm just going to take damage, right? Or I'm sorry, it's going to be let's say this is a D4, right? If I got no armor, I'm just going to be rolling a D4. Hope to God I don't get hurt. If I've got light armor, I'm rolling a D6. If I've got medium armor, a D8. Maybe heavy armor is going to be a D10, but it has a lot of issues with having it. And then what happens is bracing just gives you an extra D6 advantage, right? So now what that would look like is, let's say the pressure die is a D6. Let's say I have no armor on, so I'd be rolling this versus this, right? This is my no armor dice, but I'm going to brace, so I'm going to roll this as well, and I'm going to take the higher of the 2 blue die. And so now when I roll that, it doesn't matter because I rolled a 6, etc. Right? So that would be probably the change in terms of bracing, and I think it's going to still feel very thematic and interesting. One of the other things is that I got to create my lists, yada yada. We don't have to really go into some of these. I got to figure out what the number of skills are and what the number of saving throws are. In essence, what's the point buy system? People loved that we changed the organization of this character sheet so that instead of having that skill list before, now you take whatever skills you can, and they're going to go into these sections based on how many skill points you put into them. And so now you just have skills written here, and you know, oh, I'm going to use a D6 for those skills, and I'm going to use a D8 for these skills. So it makes it very simple. I actually shifted this around so there's a lot more OKs and a little bit less greats so that, it makes more sense. But I have to figure out what that point is, because in essence, you're going to spend those points, your skill points, or I guess they're going to be like leveling points or soul points, whatever. You're going to spend those to level up skills and to add to your resistances, right? right? So I got to just figure out what that baseline number is. Because right now, the players really invested here, and they did not invest here. So if they start getting these effects, they're going to get messed up. The other thing is hero dice. So here's the thing. Originally, I was going to have the hero dice be a session-based meta currency, where it's like you only got 2 for the entire session, but the players really liked him. And they felt cool because they added that little bit of, oh, I've got my hero dice active, right? So I think that it's going to be probably an encounter-based thing. And that makes me feel like previously you have these 2 boxes where once it goes into here, it goes into here. Once it's been spent, it's gone. I might have a spent box now. And that once they're in the spent box, they stay there until the encounter's done. And then they go from the spent all the way to the vault again. And then what would be cool is that like certain leaders or heroes or abilities might be able to say, take that, you do something to a player and it takes a hero dice from their spent vault and puts it into their vault. Or, their spent box and puts it in their vault. So that might be a fun little mini game. So they definitely like that, and that's okay, because if they like hero dice and it makes them a little bit more powerful, who cares? I'll just make monsters tougher, Good luck, players. What else do we see? Are there too many powers for the characters to use? This is another question. I think this depends on the characters, right? So I think this depends on the players, I should say. So let's give an example. So we had the guy who has a big axe, right? So right off the bat, he has this, right? So once a session, he gets an extra D12 advantage with his axe. So that's just one thing to take into account, right? So that's one. He has the role of leader. So now he's got 2 very specific tactics to him. So every role has 2 tactics that are only their tactics. So now he's got 2 tactics that are specific to him. He's got a class spellcasting ability, right? Which is a baseline spellcasting. And then if we go down here to actions, here are all the actions we have, right? So here's another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 different tactical actions. Is that too much? Probably. I think a lot of these are self-explanatory. I think some of these can probably be eliminated. So they didn't have any problems with it, but they didn't have to use a lot of it yet, right? And that's okay. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to change that yet. I'm going to let that roll until the players are, until I get an idea. And then this is the other one that's interesting. Is there any benefit to taking different skill bubbles? So if we look at this skill list again, once again, I don't know when I'm going to touch this. But one of the other things is that when you, depending on your class, it says, like if you take the warrior class, it says you get 10 extra stress. And with that 10 stress, you could take 2 5s. You could take a 5, a 4, and a 1. You could take a bunch of 2s and 1s. And one of the players says, is there any reason not to just fill up the 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s as you're going upwards, as opposed to taking a 5? When does a single 5 give you more benefit than having, for instance, 5 1s? Because technically, if you only had a 5, no matter what damage you took 1 to 5, you would have to circle in that 5, if that were the only one you had left. And that brings up an interesting question, because I don't think that I want a game where you have to take 5 damage to fill in that 5. That's an interesting concept. That might make it so that you get rid of all these 6s, like 4 through 6 you get rid of. You just have a bunch of 3s, 2s, and 1s, like a ton of them. And then what you're saying is, yeah, if you have all 3s, 1s and 2 damages doesn't hurt you. And if that were the case, maybe I would then just get rid of bracing, because that's in essence sort of like bracing. So that's something to consider. But that's it. That's where we're at right now. That was session 0, technically, because we had our building the characters first, and then we went straight into it. I thought it was a lot of fun. We had a good time. I've already made some changes to the character sheet, so I'm going to be sending those out to the players. And I'm going to start doing, in essence, don't want to show that. I'm, in essence, going to start doing my prep for episode 2. So hit the bell, hit the subscribe button. We'll see what's happening. All right, y'all. Leave comments.